Okay, I think we should get started. Okay. On behalf of the Center for Chinese Studies at UH Manoa, I would like to welcome you everyone to our Fall 2022 CCS webinar series. My name is Jing from the Department of East Asian Languages, where I teach 20th century Chinese literature, film, and culture. And I'm currently also serving as the CCS director and the organizer of this webinar series. Today's session is being recorded and the file will be uploaded to the CCS website, the link of which you can now see in the chat forum if you click on it on the tool menu at the bottom of your screen. We will also upload the recorded file to our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do so, as you can find previously recorded CCS webinar sessions there as well, in case you missed them. Our complete program flyer for this semester is posted on the CCS website and Instagram, and I encourage you all to check it out because we have an impressive lineup of presentations, including several co-sponsored, interdisciplinary, interregional faculty panels with the Center for Southeast Asian Studies that are part of a larger research project focusing on China and its relationship with Southeast Asia. Several of our upcoming sessions have also been organized by individual CCS Executive Committee members who were able to secure the participation of renowned Chinese studies scholars from the mainland US and beyond. Today's event is also co-sponsored by the Chinese flagship program of the Department of East Asian Languages and Literatures, and we would like to thank and acknowledge their support. Before I introduce the moderator of today's session, Dr. Cindy Ning, let me remind you of some logistical issues. Please use the chat tool at the bottom of your screen that you can see for posting only technical queries, but use the Q&A for posting comments and questions at any time during the presentation. We will monitor it and present it to our speakers after their presentations. Please do not wait until the end to send your questions because we might run out of time to answer them. In order to accommodate everyone, we kindly ask that you please keep your comments concise and ask no more than 2 questions, so we keep within the 30 minutes we have allocated for the Q&A session. We will try our best to answer your question in the order they have been submitted, but we might also synthesize and group together similar questions so we can save time and make room for other questions and comments. After today's presentations, we will send out a brief survey, and we would appreciate if you could give us a minute or 2 to give us your feedback. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Cindy Ning, who has served as the CCS Associate Director for almost 4 decades now. Many of you also know Dr. Ning as a prolific scholar of Chinese language pedagogy, and she also currently serves as the president of CLIA, which stands for Chinese Language Education Association of Hawaii. Dr. Ning has published 3 series of Chinese language instructional materials with Yale University Press and was the principal investigator of 14 STARTALK Chinese summer programs at UH Manoa. Since last year, she has been serving as the PI of the year-long STARTALK program, and today's event will present some of the highlights of this project. So, without further ado, Dr. Cindy Ning.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very generous introduction. I will very briefly introduce some of my co-speakers, co-panelists today. For some of the speakers, we'll have a slightly more detailed introduction later. So first, I'd like to introduce Sun Jialin. Behind her, the wall says Sunny. That's her. She is the project director of the STARTALK program. She has been with me from the beginning. This is our 14th STARTALK, and we've done 14 STARTALKs together. 2 of the 3 speakers who will be making comments this session are Jacob Algrim. Jacob, could you wave or nod or something? Yeah. And Xi Maddox, Yang Xi. A 3rd speaker is in class right now. She'll join us as soon as her class is over. And that is Wu Jing. And all 3 of them are with the Department of East Asian Languages and Literatures. All 3 are instructors, and all 3 are PhD students. So you'll find out a little bit more about their foci a little later. But today we're going to be talking about the 14 years of federal leadership in U.S. Chinese language education. And primarily, we're going to be talking about STARTALK. But it's not just STARTALK. The University of Hawaii has been very lucky to benefit from National Foreign Language Resource Center funding and National Resource Center and East Asian Studies funding. All of those programs focus on, in the beginning, they called it proficiency-based language instruction and then performance-based language instruction. And STARTALK is trying to take it to more detail. So we'll talk about it today, exactly what kind of detail. So STARTALK is a federal program managed and funded by the National Security Agency. They target K-14 students in support of the STARTALK goals, which are below. And they target Arabic, Chinese, Korean, Persian, and Russian, critical need languages to the US. And of these languages, Chinese is by far the biggest investment. There's many more Chinese programs than, I think there's more Chinese programs than all the others combined. So the goals include increase the number of students enrolled, increase the number of highly effective teachers, increase the number of highly effective materials and curricula, and enhance workforce development in the federal government to meet national security needs through the study of critical languages. This last one was added in this round, workforce development. And something that, STARTALK funds all these programs, and it's up to anybody who applies how they're going to do it, what they want to do. So the goal is to, have more students, have better teachers, have better materials. How you want to do it is up to you. But whatever you do, there are 6 principles that STARTALK focuses on. But though these 6 principles are on the basis of commonly accepted practices within the foreign language field these days. And I'm not going to go into these in great detail because people who know what these are know it very well already. And people who don't know what these are, you can't learn about them in an hour. So ACTFL, the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, talks about 5 C's. So it's not just communications. Communication is intimately tied with culture and connections to other fields like other disciplines, comparisons between your target culture and your own, and communities. So where do all these language exist? There's communities of use at home, within this country, and elsewhere, the 5 C's. And then ACTFL talks about integrated performance assessment. So when we're checking to see how effective our language practices are, and we are checking to see how well our students can perform, these are 3 arenas. 1, interpret. Can they look at texts and listen to stuff and interpret well? Can they communicate interpersonally, one-on-one with or one and two small group with other people in speech and writing? And presentationally, and so one-way communication, the speaker, the learner to a whole group of people, one chance, one shot. Can you put out a performance, give a speech or some sort of a statement and put out a poster or something presentationally? So 3 modes. So on the basis of 5 C's, 3 modes, these are the 6 principles of STARTALK, which are also, nationally accepted best practices. And these 6 principles haven't changed in the 14 years in that we've been operating. The only things that have been changed is fine-tuning how you can implement this. So standards-based, thematically organized curriculum. And in a minute, we'll talk a little bit more about each of these principles. But first, standards-based, thematically organized curriculum. Learner-centered classroom, very important. Target language. So as much as possible, use the language you're teaching. Integrate culture, content, language. Authentic materials. performance-based assessment. That's the three modes there. So standards-based basically means, I said earlier that the National Resource Center and the National Foreign Language Research Center had begun by 40 years ago by talking about proficiency-oriented curriculum. So this is these are the proficiency guidelines. Any language you speak, you can be rated on the basis of these scales, okay? And I can't go into it in much detail, but just realize there are these rating scales. And when we provide a curriculum, we keep these in mind. At what level are the students coming in? At what level do we hope that they will be leaving our courses? So if they're coming in at novice high and we're hoping that they'll leave at intermediate low, that means we know pretty well what kind of content and what kind of instruction we should be delivering. On the other hand, if they're coming in at advanced high and we're trying to push them to superior, that's a very different kind of curriculum. Okay, so grammar is not the focus anymore, okay. Learner-centeredness basically means it's not what the teacher says and does that's important, it's what the learner says and does that's important. So as much as possible in the course of instruction, we have to get them to do things. It's the learner doing things that allows the content to sink in and become operationalized. So we have to find ways of getting them to use stuff, to do stuff, learner-centeredness. Comprehensible input. So you use the target language at least 90% of the time. So if I'm teaching Chinese, I'm speaking in Chinese 90% of the time. Okay, that's easy to say. If you say, oh, I'm a native speaker, I can speak 100% of the time. It doesn't count if the students don't understand what you're saying. If the students don't understand what you're saying, it's not target language, it's gobbledygook. So you have to use comprehensible target language 90% of the time. And the challenge is to find strategies, find ways of making your language comprehensible. And not by translation, other ways, okay. Integrating culture, content, and language in a world language classroom. So somehow we have to bring the target culture into our classrooms. It has to be there in front of the students' eyes all the time, so that, unknowingly they're absorbing all this information about the target culture, what it looks like, a sense of what it smells like, a sense of how people interact in their own space and move into other people's spaces and move into the general geography. So somehow bring the culture to life in the classroom. One way of doing that is by using authentic materials. Authentic materials are made by native speakers for native speakers. So these are all examples of authentic materials on the screen. So if we can make this comprehensible to the students somehow, their world should be inundated with that. And then when we assess them, not via paper and pencil tests as much as possible, but by having them do things. So here, for example, is a student who's written out a recipe for her favorite dish. Here's a guy giving a self-introduction, a 3-minute self-introduction. This is like Chinese 102. And here's somebody who's made a cartoon to entertain classmates. So those are the 6 principles. And the STARTALK at the University of Hawaii began in 2007, and every year we had a summer program until 2018. It was a teacher training institute plus concurrent summer student language camp in the entire month of July. It really worked. We kept fine-tuning it. We kept doing different things, but let me just go back. It worked. In 2019, we were not allowed to apply for it anymore because the federal government became very disturbed about Confucius Institutes in the US. And because we had a Confucius Institute in Hawaii, we were not allowed to apply for the STARTALK, so we didn't have one that year. And 2020, there was no STARTALK anywhere because of the pandemic. Everything was shut down. Then they made us close our Confucius Institute. So then there was no problem anymore. And 2021, we had a STARTALK again, which was online teacher training, and we used volunteer teachers, students. So for the bulk of our past programs, it looked like this first program. We had teachers, all the ones who are in white, come and they train for about a week, and then they start implementing stuff to students who come in from all over the country. And then in 2021, when it was all online, we went to Zoom. Now, in this round, they're doing something new. It's a year-round program, not just a summer program. So this round, we have 4 semesters of instruction. We just finished spring 2022 online asynchronous. We finished summer 2022 face-to-face 3-week institute. And now we're doing online asynchronous instruction. And we will have 1 more semester after that of online asynchronous instruction. And that then our program will be over. And because University of Hawaii is not applying for another STARTALK program, we don't foresee another STARTALK program coming up. So this is, if we can, okay, this is our website. So if you are interested in more details about it, it's manoa.hawaii.edu STARTALK. And I don't know how to get this to be like that, maybe. So I would just like to use this to introduce some of the speakers. So that's me, and Professor Jiang Song of East Asian Languages is one of our instructional leads. Sun Jialin is our program director. We have 2 other lead instructors at the high school level from the US mainland. And today our 3 speakers are Wu Jing. She has been active with study abroad, and her research interests are assessment, intercultural development in study abroad settings. Yang Xi has 2 master's degrees. She has a background in music, ethnomusicology, so interactional linguistics and Chinese language teaching pedagogy. And Jacob Algrim will be talking. He is focused on cognitive linguistics and cross-cultural communication. And we have a number of other instructors on our team. Okay, so if we go back here. How am I doing for time? I guess pretty much on time. We're going to begin with Yang Xi. So the 6 principles of STARTALK instruction, each of the 3 speakers is taking 2 and talking more in detail about what it looks like, or what it is like to operationalize these principles in actual instruction. So I guess we're going to stay with this PowerPoint, and Yang Xi will tell me when to advance to the next slide. So Yang Xi will talk about learner-centered instruction and comprehensible input. Wu Jing will talk about the standards-based curriculum and integrated performance assessment. Jacob will talk about culture, content, and language, and using authentic materials. So we'll start with Yang Xi.
Thank you, Cindy. Hi, so I will start with the learner-centered instruction. So on the STARTALK official page, it states that, quote, learners benefit from an environment in which teachers and learners collaborate as partners in the learning process. Teachers make instruction decisions based on learners' age, interests, abilities, and needs. Teachers create multiple opportunities for learners to engage in real-world tasks in the target language that spark curiosity and invite inquiry. Teacher plan multiple opportunities for learners-to-learners interaction, enabling learners to collaborate and communicate about topics that are meaningful to them, unquote. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I forgot I was sharing screen.
Next.
Is this the next slide?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Yangxi.
This is not the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
To summarize a little, our classroom instruction design addresses these 4 elements: collaboration, motivation, engagement, and facilitation. Based on the nature of the classroom interaction setting, our STARTALK program has 2 settings: asynchronous online and face-to-face. Each setting ultimately defines the teacher's instructional design, interactional mode, and the use of technology. Next slide, please. So the asynchronous setting relies heavily on technology to ensure our instructional delivery and make our program reachable and available to our students from anywhere at all times. We use Moodle, Padlet, Kia, Google Docs, and Google Forms. And we strive to make sure that we provide sufficient language support, a user-friendly interaction to establish an I+1 learning environment. The communication mode is mainly interpretive to begin with, and then presentational as the final student output. We also have a discussion section to encourage teachers, students, and student-student interaction, which is a topic that will very likely spark student interest, therefore motivate them. We have topics relevant to the real world, such as the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympic Games last semester, a focus on romance love to celebrate Valentine's Day, a focus on family and moral values in conjunction with the Qingming Festival, and attention to current technology such as video gaming, a 3D interactive feeding room, and the application of artificial intelligence to pig farming. Next slide, please. In an in-person setting, the program continues to use technology such as Padlet and Google Classroom, but is more focused on developing students' interpersonal skills. Activities the STARTALK teachers used to facilitate such instructional goals are: Who is the Spy? Ask, Ask, and Trade, PBLL excursions, playwriting, in which students decide what to write, and final performance of the play, and the production of a music video, dorm counselor-led cultural activities after class. Next slide, please. The I+1 concept is an inseparable part of the comprehensible input. It targets the relationship between learners' current ability and their potential development. And the concept manifests in actual teaching are, quote here, from the STARTALK principles. Teacher uses a variety of strategies to make the target language comprehensible and frequently check for understanding in a variety of ways in order to modify input as necessary. Learners have frequent meaningful opportunities for target language production and are able to engage in learning activities without resorting to their native language, unquote. Next slide, please. During the program's pre-selection stage, we gave each student an oral proficiency interview and distributed them into 3 classes. Based on each class's proficiency level, the instructors set up student learning outcomes for each unit. After the online program started, we continue to monitor each student's progress and reassign them to their appropriate level as appropriate. Video and additional language support and teacher feedback are provided. Next slide, please. Face-to-face instruction offers multimodal source of information to teachers to determine what to teach, when to intervene, how to help in any given instructional moment, and reflect insight into their following day's planning. Through scaffolding, teacher can achieve comprehensible input that includes but not is limited to step-step instruction, task-based and project-based approaches, and performance-based assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Yangxi. I see that Jing has scuttled into the room. She just finished teaching and she's joined us in time. And she's going to be talking about beginning with implementing a standards-based thematically organized curriculum. Jing.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Yang Lao Shi, Yang Xi. So thank you, Yang Xi, for introducing and demonstrating the first two STARTALK principles. So aloha, everyone. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Jing Wu. I'm a Chinese instructor and also a PhD student in the East Asian Language and Literature Department at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So what I would like to present to you today are the two of the STARTALK principles. So as we know, the STARTALK principles for effective teaching and learning describe the characteristics of effective learning and language teaching and learning. So each STARTALK principles is focused on creating learning experience that enable learners to develop their language and culture competency. So we apply all 6 STARTALK principles to ensure that they're all engaged in a meaningful real-world learning experiences that prepare them to use the target language beyond the classroom. So first of all, our teachers use the units that incorporate the word readiness standard for learning languages, providing a meaningful and purposeful context that is cognitively engaging, that relevant to learners. And the units cover 3 modes of communication. There are interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational, aligning performance assessment tasks and the learning experiences. So our curriculum is geared towards learners at all levels by providing them with ample opportunities to practice the target language through the incorporation of authentic materials and the interactive tasks, and to develop cross-cultural awareness and understanding through interaction with people and the places of cultural relevance. And each thematic unit is centered around the real-life scenarios that are meaningful to our learners, such as developing Honolulu Chinatown, shopping in Honolulu Chinatown, and then asking for directions. The goal is to prepare them to use the target language to accomplish each communicative task as if in the target culture. A wide variety of thematic units were then developed around this organizing concept for our learners, leading to a culturally rich, immersive experience during the spring 2022 semesters. So next slide, please. The following themes are covered is like festivals, gender, seasons, family expectations, technology. Then in the current fall 2022 semester, we were mainly focused on the following topics: Chinese thought, Chinese movies and TV shows, Chinese cuisines, nature and environment, geographic and travel, wellness practices, Chinese art. Next slide, please. So here are the key components that guided and strengthened our curriculum development. According to the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages and the Educational Testing Services, TOEFL proficiency guideline, our learners in class 1 began at the novice low to novice mid proficiency level, and our goal is to help them reach the intermediate low and intermediate mid proficiency level. As for class 2, learners started at the novice high to intermediate mid, and we aim to assist them in achieving the intermediate mid to intermediate high. And lastly, the entrance proficiency level for most class 3 learners is intermediate high or higher. Therefore, our goal is to encourage them to attend advanced low or higher level. Next slide, please. So following the TOEFL standards manifest in the 5 C's, which are communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities. So our curriculum incorporated task-based instruction in each unit so that learners are able to use the target language for communicative and meaningful purpose in various real-world situations. Like the well-designed curricular activity illustrate how these standards are operationalized in 3 classes. For example, in terms of communication, learners interact with their classmates and interactively talk about each other's favorite Chinese movies and TV shows. And secondly, in terms of the culture acquisition, during the summer camp, our learners learned to sing Chinese songs and some other traditional Chinese games. Then as for the connections, our learners understood the Honolulu Chinatown history and the Chinese immigrant history and connections during our guest speakers' talks. Moreover, regarding comparisons, learners were able to compare American and Chinese celebrations of festivals and so forth. And lastly, about communities, learners had a chance to interact with their native speakers in the local Chinese community during several project-based language learning field trips and excursions in the summer camp. So under the 5Cs benchmark, our learners not only applied what they have learned in and outside the program to the real world situations, but above all, develop their cross-culture competency and appreciation for the beauty of Chinese culture, arts, and language. Next slide, please. So overall, to ensure the program effectiveness, our curriculum design was closely aligned with the 6 STARTALK principles. Firstly, our TOEFL standard-based curriculum building the thematic units. Secondly, paired or group work to promote a learner-centered setting. Thirdly, instructors' endeavors to use the target language and provide comprehensible input. Moreover, a variety of field trips and culture workshops to integrate language, culture, content, via experiential situation and situational learning. Besides incorporating real-life materials and the content into instruction to enhance the sense of authenticity. And lastly, using the integrated performance-based assessment, such as presenting a favorite seasons to demonstrate interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational skills. Next slide, please. So next, I will talk about another essential STARTALK principle, conducting integrated performance assessment. As we know, effective language learning experiences are facilitated by using of assessment strategy that allow learners to demonstrate what they can do with what they know and to receive helpful feedback on their attainment of performance objects. The performance and the feedback domain of teacher effectiveness for language learning framework identifies the characteristic and the behaviors presented by a model world language teacher and supports a need for conducting performance assessment. So conducting performance assessments is an essential part of effective language learning process. So our STARTALK teachers share unit and lesson goals with learners on the syllabus and monitor how well they are doing in meeting those goals. And learners engage in relevant real-world performance tasks to demonstrate how well they are meeting the performance target and goals of the unit for each mode of communication. So teachers use evidence from performance assessment tasks and the formative checks for learners during the lessons to provide a timely descriptive feedback to learners and adjust instructions as needed. Thus, we designed integrated performance assessment tasks for learners at all different levels. So the integrated performance assessment IPA model developed by American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Language, TOEFL, is a cluster assessment featuring 3 tasks, and each of which reflects one of the 3 modes of communication. There are interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. And the 3 tasks are aligned within a core content or theme, reflecting the manner in which learners naturally acquire and use the target language in the real world or the classroom. As indicated in the graph here, the IPA mode rooted in dynamic assessment connect with the performance-based assessment method is an effective form of assessment and learning, not only measures learners' progress and performance in the 3 mode of communication in meeting the standards, but also has a washback effect on learner learning and instructional practice. Next slide, please. So basically, we begin with interpretive listening or reading task in which students view and read a piece of authentic Chinese text, something that were produced by Chinese native speakers for Chinese native speakers. And then based on their current proficiency level, students need to do their best to understand and comprehend that text. subsequent exercises and daily activities help them intake some new language from this text. Afterwards, students interact with their classmates and teachers through interpersonal communicative tasks by saying or writing messages to each other with reference to the piece they have just interpreted. This activity usually helps them to take ownership of the language they are being exposed to and give them increased confidence to use it to communicate in Chinese. Finally, students will work on the presentational communicative mode of task in which they prepare brief oral or written reports, videos, sounds, stories, etc., supported wherever possible by illustration and other prompts to help those who are listening or watching them understand the meaning. The viewers or listeners will circle back to the interpretive mood to comprehend what they are presenting about the topic they're working on. So we're very glad to see that most of our students show confidence and also feel very proud of themselves while demonstrating their interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational skills in a final presentation by the end of each session. Well, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening. Next, I will hand it over to Jacob, Ouyang 老师, and he will elaborate the other two STARTALK principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Wu Jing.
Thank you. So I will be talking a bit about integrating culture, content, and language, and also our use of authentic materials in the STARTALK curriculum over the past semester and summer and ongoing for the next year. So the first conviction that I want to begin with is just that teaching culture should be more than simple recognition of different holidays. It's easy to say there's a holiday that happens at this time, the people eat a special food, maybe have some special songs, but it's good in the language classroom if we can try to go a bit deeper. So an example of one thing that we did in our curriculum, the first picture you see there, sort of the blue background, is a screenshot from a video that we used as a text in the materials for Qi Jie, which is sometimes called Chinese Valentine's Day. And so this video is a depiction of the traditional story that underlies the holiday. And presentation of such stories, where they exist, where they are presentable, they give basis to the holiday, but they can also express values that are important to the culture. And being stories that are commonly known in the target culture, learning them also brings the language learners more into that sort of shared knowledge world of the average native speaker. And the second picture I have here is a screenshot from a music video for a song 朋友, friend, that we had as part of the materials in our curriculum as well. And we actually had them watch two music videos for this song. The first one was the original or official music video that's, dramatized and made by the actual artist or in coordination with the artist. But this video was really just depicting everyday life of these students in China. It has them sort of running around school, right? It's sort of a student-made video for the song. And I thought this was really good because in showing just sort of a common setting with normal students, normal friends, it helps to normalize what for some students may be an otherwise distant culture or people group. Right? So normalizing and humanizing the target culture. And then we would also have students engage in self-reflection or application, where they reflect on and discuss their own life experiences and perspectives related to themes of the module that they're currently studying. So for Qi Jie or Chinese Valentine's Day, students talked about someone important in their life, connecting language and target cultural content to their own identities and memories as well. And they would then use the target language, Chinese, for expression of their own memories and values, so that this target language is becoming hopefully a vehicle for true self-expression for the students, building their ability to identify with native speakers through them. And lastly, in the most recent module that we have students going through on cultural philosophy or Chinese thought, as was mentioned on the previous slide. We talk about philosophical tenets that are important to Chinese culture, being Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism. And these are important because they affect and give avenues of expression to people's values, and can actually have real effect on people's behavior in the target culture. Next slide, please. As part of our curriculum, we also had a project-based language learning section, or PBLL, as mentioned earlier. And we've also seen how we have 3 different classes based on student abilities. And so every Friday for the first semester, we had the project-based language learning readings. And then during the summer, we had excursions where they went out to their one of the areas to gather data like photos and to sort of really experience the focus of their project that they've been learning about. So class 1 was focused on Waikiki or Oahu tourism. And this was largely focused on Hawaii as the locality of our university and the STARTALK summer camp. But we used authentic materials where possible. So here we have an example of a Bishop Museum ad, which was all in Chinese originally. And then we also had presentations for each of the projects from someone associated with that area. So for Waikiki, we had a presentation from a tour guide whose target customer base were Chinese tourists. And so he was able to share in Chinese about the surrounding area. And the excursion day also included an interview task where they had to try and find someone in Waikiki who was a speaker of Chinese to interview. And then for class 2, focused on Sun Yat-sen. Of course, he's a very important historical figure for modern China, being the first president of the Republic of China. And so the students in class 2 did a lot of reading about his time in Hawaii when he spent studying here. And they learned more about, through those readings, learned about modern history of China, Chinese culture, as well as culture of people of Chinese descent that are now residing in Hawaii. And on excursions, they visited different statues of him, visited the schools he attended when he was in Hawaii, and engaged with a lot of authentic material in the form of writing on statues and also material from a website that talks a lot about his history here in Hawaii. And of course, we had a presentation from Yan Chun, who is associated with the Sun Yat-sen Hawaii Foundation as well. For class 3, Honolulu Chinatown, they learned a lot about the history of Chinese migration to Hawaii, hardships endured as a community in Hawaii, and saw firsthand the operations of shops and restaurants in Chinatown by local Chinese people. And they engaged in readings in Chinese about Chinatown and had a presentation from a member of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. So all excursions had that interview task as well, which required students to try to find a Chinese speaker in the vicinity where they were and ask them about locations or historical events of importance to the Chinese heritage community in Honolulu. Next slide, please. So moving into authentic materials, which of course overlaps, right, with culture as well. I just want to mention this difficulty in finding authentic material that is accessible to the current level of Chinese that the students have. There's a lot of value in authentic material, being that it's the same content that native speakers consume, and it shows the students how the language is actually used outside of classroom context or leveled reader. But there's also a lot of difficulty, right? Especially if students can't understand a significant portion of the text, then the content loses learning value. You can't even use context clues to figure out parts you don't understand the context. And then the cultural information also becomes inaccessible in that. And so we can try to sort of scaffold students into this. So one thing we've done in the most recent module for Chinese thought, the first image I have here is a screenshot of an English summary in comparison of major philosophies in Chinese culture. And students watch this video first as scaffolding, giving them the knowledge necessary to hopefully better understand the later video that would be in Chinese, sort of warm them up for it. And the second picture there is a shot of just that video, a similar type of comparison, but done in Chinese. And students also ultimately discuss in Chinese their thoughts and applications of the philosophies, thus requiring them to translate anything learned in English back into the target language. Next slide, please. Materials used for the project-based language learning portion of the curriculum included videos, such as here I have a screenshot from a video about Sun Yat-sen. And this video was intended for native speakers, albeit sort of leveled to younger native speakers. So it was still leveled a bit. And we had readings from a leveled reader for class 2. We had authentic materials were available, such as that Bishop Museum flyer I showed earlier for Waikiki. And we had readings written by native Chinese speaking TAs as well. And these readings, though they were written for the course and sort of written for the learners to hopefully access, they did tend to approximate authentic materials in terms of difficulty. And so that's what I want to get into a bit next. On the next slide, please. We surveyed students about halfway through the first semester. And I put just one question from the survey here, and it's specifically about the project-based language learning portion and the readings that we had for that. So this question, using only your own knowledge and provided vocabulary lists, approximately what percentage of the Friday readings or audios would you estimate you could understand? And this chart we see here is from class 1, and we'll look at the other charts for other classes as well. And you'll see there's a clear difference in understanding between levels of classes. Class 1 has the least developed Chinese skills, tending to have less time under their belt of actually studying the language, whereas conversely, class 3 has the most developed, most advanced Chinese skills, and thus the greatest repertoire to work with in the beginning, even before getting into the STARTALK program. Now, here on this chart, you'll see 4 different options. About 10% was the lowest choice that the students could choose. There was actually 2 higher choices that you don't see for class 1 here because nobody in class 1 chose those. And so that was 70 to 90% or 90% or more. And next slide, please, for class 2. So here we see for class 2 that nobody chose that less than 10%. Right? So no one chose the lowest option. Also, no one chose more than 90%. So from my own perspective, I think the sweet spot is probably around 80% here, so that you can achieve a flow in reading, but you're still encountering words that you need to learn. You're not encountering so much that it makes it too difficult to even get the gist of the text. So class 2 is beginning to approach that a bit better. And the next slide, please. We see that for class 3, no respondents said that they understood less than 10% or more than 90%, but they do appear to have more students approximating that sweet spot of greater general understanding, but still room for growth initiated by the material. After this survey, we tried to build in more scaffolding to the materials, marking proper nouns and vocabulary words in different colors on the web page on the screen. Many proper nouns, given that they're not likely to occur frequently in general discourse, were likely to be unknown to students. So by marking them clearly, we just wanted students to be able to read around them easier, to focus on getting more of the gist of the overall reading and not being too distracted by words that might not actually be as useful in their future Chinese repertoire. And so in this, just attempting to approach that balance, right? Using good cultural materials, using good authentic materials, but also trying to increase students' access to those materials along the way. And that's all I have for those 2 points. Thank you.
Okay. So that was it. That's about all we had to say, where we sort of galloped through in good time. Thank you very much, Jacob and Yangxi and Wu Jing. I think you guys did an amazing